We're doing a live video meeting.
Hi, Biggie. You can hear me fine? Biggie, I just sent you a message to make sure you could hear me okay. Okay. Alright. Well, Tatsalach, Inamunik West, Ayat Tokit, Inamunik West, Soyapo Timki, Jasmine, Higheagle. So, hello, my name's Jasmine. I'm a member of Wellbrighty. Behind me is my daughter, Cavell, and she is going to sing me a quick song to give me her strength and her beauty.
Right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The I Am Special one?
Yes.
Okay. In Wasatao, in Wasatao, a tao I was in, a tao I was in Wasatao, in Wasatao, a tao I was in, a tao I was in Wasatao. In Wasatao, a tao I was in, a tao I was in. Hey, thank you, sister. Love you. Love you.
All right, so that song is in our language, and it's I Am Special. So it's a beautiful song, and my daughter's strength. So, whew. So I'm gonna start from so it's supposed to be what it was like, what happened, what is it like now. But I'm gonna share a little part about me in my childhood, because I feel like it has a huge part of where my path went and why it was, how I got led into alcohol and drugs. But little girl, I was for the most part I had a really good life. I had all my needs were met. I had new school clothes when the beginning of the school year began. I had I have a huge family. I have 5 sisters, 3 brothers, and now I'm currently, a mother of 4. But when I grew up, the things I feel like that were huge parts of things that happened to me. I was molested as a little girl, and when that happened, I remember hiding behind a bed, and I was being told by 2 adults to never let a man do that to me. So I became really confused, and I instantly took it on as it was my fault, and that's something that I'm not supposed to allow to happen. So, and then after that, I became very angry. At a young age, I had to do anger management counseling, because I would get into fights, I would act up, I would bully other kids, I was a tomboy. I had to be really tough because I knew I didn't want anybody else hurting me. I started experimenting when I was like 10, 11 years old with marijuana and with alcohol. And from that, I ended up blacking out, and then when I woke up the next day, I thought I was becoming a woman. I thought I started my menstrual cycle because I had blood on my underwear, but then that was it. I was in another session with my anger management counselor, and I remember I started telling her I feel like something wrong or something bad happened, because of what happened. She instantly got me into the clinic, and I had to do a female woman exam, and I ended up getting chlamydia from it. And since I was at a young age, they had to call my mom. My mom instantly, and they started asking me questions. Is that something that you consented? And since I was already hurt as a little girl, I thought it was my fault because I was drinking and the people I was around. So I said it was right, and I ended up getting chlamydia from it, and my mom had to pick me up, and I got in trouble again, yelled at, so I became very hateful and very angry towards my mom because I felt like I wanted everybody to see, know that I was screaming inside as a little girl, wanting people to know my truth, but I didn't know how to speak it, so I became very stubborn. It only progressed from there, from my behaviors of being skipping school. I ran away from home. I sneaking out at night or whatever, and then throughout my high school, it kind of only progressed except through basketball. Basketball was my outlet because I felt I was really good at it, and I felt like I made people happy. People weren't mad at me. I felt like I was being good. Throughout my high school, I end up losing my grandma. My parents got divorced, and in my junior year. So from there, I started experimenting with harder drugs like ecstasy, cocaine, and things only got worse. Out of high school, then I had my son at an early age, my first son, and I was like that mom that was going to be like, I'm going to give him the best life. I'm not going to bring him around no drugs, no alcohol, no nothing. I was breastfeeding him, and it was like probably I stayed good for, I got enrolled in college and everything, and but I stayed good until he was about a year old, and then it was my birthday, and I felt like I was doing so good I could celebrate, and I went into, I did ecstasy, and I was drinking, and then my son would not take a bottle, and I gave in to him, and I ended up breastfeeding him, and I'm sharing that with you because that was a huge guilt as a mother, and I would never shared with that until I, got my healing. But then I ended up having, and I was in an ugly relationship, but I always wanted my children to have kids with one dad, and so I stayed in that relationship for 6 years. I had 2 children with him. We've gotten to a lot of, domestic violence fights. I didn't know how to have a healthy relationship. I was a type of person, my way or no way. And if you weren't grateful for the things that I'd done for you, I became angry and bitter with you. I've been in and out, of jail. I could never hold a job very long because of drinking and using. And then I had my 2 more of my other children, my 2 younger ones, and that relationship, I just don't know how to be in a relationship. I was very one-sided, and I still, but I had my other 2 children. But in that, the first time I went to treatment is because I got in a real bad fight with my ex, and where I end up stabbing him because I was the type of person only. I was going to win a fight no matter what. It didn't matter what I grabbed or whatever it was. I was just in a lot of it. I didn't realize till later on that it was all pure fear, right? It was fear, and I felt like I felt superior, and I had this ego, and I felt just tough, and I act like I was fearless, right? But then I end up going to treatment because I didn't want to go to jail. I mean, I still had to go to jail for a little bit, and I knew how to manipulate our tribal court system by if I be good for a year, those charges are going to be gone, right? I didn't think that they never took care of your stuff or kept your record, and I knew how to manipulate our tribal court system. But when I went to treatment, it wasn't a 12-step program, and it was only a month long. But one thing that I did learn there was about forgiveness. And I was like, no way, like I can't forgive people for what has happened to me, from being raped, from being people that has hurt me, and people that has molested me, people that has done my family wrong, done me wrong. I'm like, I'm never going to go up to them and tell them, I forgive you for what you did to me. And what that my counselor taught me was that, no, you forgive them for yourself. You forgive them for yourself so you can move forward, so you can move forward in a good way, because I was holding on to all that anger. I was holding on, and I was keeping track of what everybody has done to me, regardless of what I'd done back to people or how many people I hurt. abandoning my children, having to be gone at treatment and being whatever it was, like I could never look at myself. So I was there, and I didn't last very long, less than a month. My sister picked me up from treatment, and she was the only one that showed up, and she didn't even remember driving up there to pick me up. So I went right back into it pretty much. It didn't last very long, and I remember that I had to stay good though. I had to stay good, and of course I didn't stay good. One of my sisters had to take one of my charges for me because I got into another fight, and I was really set on like, you getting into a fight, but I wasn't ready to take the consequences. And so then it only progressed from there. I was out of my relationships, and I picked people that were sicker than me, people that I felt that I could, I don't know, like I just had no self-worth. I had nothing, and I ended up losing my house, and I lost all my children when I gave up on life because I thought that I was always taking on other people's problems. I was always like, when's my break? When do I get a release? But I didn't trust anybody to be able to release anything. I ended up losing my house, and I lost my children to CPS. And I remember I was on the Columbia River, and when they told me they're telling me I was an unfit mom. I remember screaming, and I hung up on them, and that was the first time I went to a needle, and that was the first time, and it feels so evil and so wrong, but it just felt like how that happened, but it completely numbed me. And that was, so I went into meth. And that was in June 2014. Meth and the needle. And I remember those days when I would wake up and I would, that anxiety would hit me because I was sober. And it would be all quiet around me. And I remember I'd wake up and I would think, where's my kids at? It's too quiet, because if your kids are quiet, they're usually doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And I would think that I was back home, and my kids were maybe jumping on a trampoline naked or something, something crazy what little res kids do. And I remember I'd jump up, and then I'd look around where I was at, and I'd realize I was nowhere near them, that my children weren't with me. I remember just looking around, and then that anxiety would hit me, and it would just flood me, and it felt like I wanted to break and I wanted to cry, but I would go always straight back to the drugs and alcohol. I always kept that with me because I knew my days when I would wake up that way. So it kept going, I would come back, I would appear, in their life maybe every 6 months or something. I'd stay gone. I would try to just send them money and be there for them, but I I was in another, of course, another relationship, and it wasn't until I got into a different relationship till in June, or it wasn't June, but in 2016, I was in a really bad domestic violence relationship, and I remember those days, those relationships where you feel like you want to, where I would get beat up and then, forced to have sex while I had a swollen eye, bloody face. And I felt so powerless, and I felt so weak, and I felt like I deserved all of it. And I would stay in relationships like that because I felt like I'm not taking care of my kids. I can't, I wasn't taking care of myself, my family. I wasn't nothing. So I felt like that's what I deserved. That was my karma. And I remember that day when I finally was going to leave, saying, no, this isn't it. This isn't right, or whatever. And I thought the only way I could get out was by suicide. But anytime I felt like I was about suicidal, Creator always sent somebody, whether it was to sing a song, uplifting words or something it was, and I would walk away, I would cry, and it would bring me back. Just a little piece of me would come back. And I felt like my saving grace was always jail. I would end up in jail. Like when I was leaving that man, it was during wintertime in 2016, and I woke up in Yakima County from the river, and I was like, how? And I had milk and food and all this stuff all over the jail cell, and I was like thinking, waking up, and I'm like, man, where am I? I had this huge migraine and this mess, and they were coming in, they're like, ready to come take your pictures and do all this now. And I was like, what happened in here? I was like, do you guys want me to clean this up? And then she's like, you don't remember last night? And And I didn't. I remember I had welts on my back. I was tased. My eyes were red and swollen from being pepper sprayed. And I ended up being in jail for assault on a DUI and assault on an officer. And I didn't remember none of it. But one thing I've learned, from that is when you're in domestic violence relationship, when you go through trauma, and then there's different things that are going to trigger you. So it was another man, it was a male officer. So I know that's one thing that was probably triggering for me, but I didn't know where I was. I thought I was in Norcor in the Dalles, and then when I was like, YCDOC, like, where am I at? And then I finally figured it out. And then, I remember when I went in there, I was really sick. I had a bad UTI, and I remember it went to my kidneys. My whole body swelled up, like I was so swollen, like so I couldn't squat. I had so much pain. I was freezing, but I was sweating. And I remember I felt like I was gonna die in there, and I called my dad and my mom, and I told them, like, I really feel like I'm gonna die. Like, I'm sober. I've been sober I was in there for a few months. I was like, I've been sober and these things got worse. They won't see me, but I remember going to sleep. And my grandma Louise, who's, Otway passed, she came to me and she was repeating the Lord's Prayer. So when I woke up and I, asked some girls, will you guys do the Lord's Prayer with me? And we repeated it 10 times. And after that, I remember all that left my whole body. My body, just my swelling started going away. This hot heat wave went through me. And that's when I really, really started believing in that power of prayer. Knowing that I'm always going to be taken care of. My grandma was a prayer warrior. My family has a lot of medicine and good medicine. And that's that power of prayer. And I felt loved, right? I felt loved. I felt like I was, something I've wanted my whole life was to be seen, to be heard, to know that I'm screaming and I feel like I'm dying inside. But I want that one person to be able to see me and be able to, without me saying my words, because I didn't know how to use words. I knew how to shut down. If I was upset and mad, I would just shut down, and I could not communicate. But from there, of course, so I had every intention to be good, get out of jail, and I'm like, I'm going to do this right. I'm going to go back to my kids. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to. I was saying all that stuff over the phone, all these broken promises I was saying, not realizing I was going to break them, not realizing I didn't have any tools yet. I ended up getting released from jail, and 2 days later, I was right back to drinking and using. And then it just kind of kept going. It felt like I just was going in that revolving door of counties and jails, and felt like anytime I went to jail was just to sober up, to detox, to dry up. I remember going into jail and I would shake so bad because how bad of an alcoholic I was, the withdrawals, and when I came back and I ended up getting into another relationship, and going on the run, being in really dangerous situations, violence and guns. I remember that I felt like death was always following me everywhere. I felt like, because people would pass away, whether they got murdered or whatever it was, and it would be within a day of just leaving that place. I remember feeling so lonely and broken all over again because I broke all those promises all over again. When I brought back that relationship to home, I brought back to where my kids witnessed domestic violence, to the point of where my kids had to have a safe word. I had a safe word with them, or I felt like I would have tried to find them a babysitter, because I already knew when those times were going to happen. And then I ended up, I remember going back to jail. Of course, within a year later, I got extradited back to Yakima, and that was like my saving grace. I went back and I had a bite mark on my face. I think I broken nose. But I was grateful to be going back to Yakima County. And from there, I reached out and I was able to get into NARA, in 2017. When I first went to NARA, I remember when I walked up those steps, I remember I'm like, what is this feeling? I knew my place and my role when I went to jail. But when I went to NARA the first time, I was like, this overwhelming of fear, and this unknown feeling came over my body, and I'm like, what is this, And I remember my mom picked me up and drove me over there, and Then I still didn't have a good relationship with my mom. I was still blaming my mom for a lot of things, and I was really just being ugly and being saying the only reason why you're around me is because I'm going to be doing good. Well, of course, right? Of course my mom wants to be around me because I'm trying to, she was being there for me, but I couldn't see it as that. But when I went up those doors, what I ended up realizing what it was for Nara is because I was finally going to have to face myself. And that's something I've never had to do. I remember there was something blue in front of my feet when I was outside smoking a cigarette as I was checking in, and it was a tobacco tie. I didn't know what it was then, and I brought it into my mom, and I was like, Mom, like, what is this? And she starts telling me, and I remember my mom's like, I'm gonna sing a song with you, and she sang a song with me, and I just started crying because I told my mom I heard that song in my dream 2 nights ago before I got furloughed, and she says that she told me that because they're coming from you, Jazzy, you're at that crossroad, you're at that point. What are you going to choose? Are you going to continue to go down that left path? Or are you going to choose to go to the right on that red road? But like, you're pretty much right out of life and death. And I truly do believe that because I always felt like death was always right there. Death was always following me. I was at Nara for 2.5 weeks, and my ex found where I was at, and he showed up looking like walking death, smelling like alcohol. He had a gun on him. He had every intention to come. He said he was going to come break me out, but in Nara treatment, you could really just walk out those doors. He was in a psychosis, and so I felt all better and felt all healed because I was a couple months in jail, and I was at treatment feeling all good about myself, and I was very codependent, so I thought I could save him. So I ended up leaving Nara. I left Nara, and I was going to bring him to outpatient and trying to get him in residential, right? Because I'm right back in my relationships of trying to fix somebody. When I went to, I ended up leaving with him though, and it was deja vu all over again. I end up high-speed chase, running from the cops, and I ended up back on the river, and I remember reaching out, and I couldn't reach out to my family because I felt so much guilt and shame that I left treatment, and I was right back in that same stuff, right? That ugly feeling. And I remember reaching out to my little brother, and I told him, I'm ready to give up, brother. I'm ready to give up. Like, I hurt our family, my parents again. I hurt everybody all over again because I thought I knew what was right. I thought I was trying to do what was right, but I was like, I'm going to give up, brother, and I'm going to go right back, or I'm going to end up committing suicide, right? And my brother ended up reaching out to a brother in the Dowswell Bridey, David, and him and his wife end up coming to pick me up. They just said, stay where you're at, and we're going to pick you up, and we're going to bring you back to Nara, bring you back to Portland. And I remember getting picked up, and I was all bit up by bed bugs, and I was just smelling just lovely, right? And I remember them picking me up, and bringing me back to Nara, and Nara wouldn't accept me because I have already used. So I had to just pick up my stuff, and I remember leaving a feather with him, with David and them, because I was so grateful that he picked me up, got me out of there. And I remember he brought me down to the day center for the TPI, for the a homeless shelter, and we prayed before we went in there, and there ended up being one couple's bed at a homeless shelter. There was one couple's bed, and we went in there and ended up getting that. And then a couple, we went to we're packing around our body bag of clothes, and we went to the Wilbrighty there in Portland, the Sacred Heart, that Tuesday night. And I remember that's where I met Rex, and met everybody, and they ended up taking us in to stay at their house so we could make it because we didn't know the buses. We couldn't never make it to Nara on time to get our assessment, and it just felt like everything, it was just raining and raining. I felt like I was and I just, like, everything was against me, like, just give up, and Brother Lydell came and took us on a bus like at 6 a.m. or something, right when he got off work, and got us to outpatient. We got assessment and got back into treatment. Within 2 weeks, I had an option of how bad do you want to be back in residential, because there's a bed for you, but there's not a bed for him. And I knew that I had to move forward because I prayed about it. Like, Creator, if you open that door for me, I'm going to walk through it. I'm going to walk through it no matter what. So I got back into Nara. I got back into Nara residential, and but there was something really different about me. I think because of the trauma that I already just went through again. And then my ex ended up getting in like a week later, and I didn't know how to be in a relationship or be sober with him, and I was very insecure. I was very jealous. Um, I didn't know how to communicate or talk to him without screaming and yelling. I didn't know how to, if somebody, if especially if a woman, if they talked to me a certain way, I would scream and I would yell. I had to do a lot of thinking reports in Nara, and I'm really grateful for my counselor then, because she could see me when I was triggered. She knew when to back off. She knew when I was supposed to go smudge. She knew she could read me, and she would always reassure me, and I used to get my feelings hurt because I always thought that she was telling me I was irrational, or, I would take things, a person of trauma, like, you can take things the wrong way a lot. Like, I was always taking things personal. I was always just only hearing the bad. Like, I feel like you're talking bad to me, or you're only seeing the bad in me. And I was such a codependent person and so worried about what people thought about me. It hurt me when people seen me that way. And I didn't know that all I had to do was just be honest, right? That's all I had to do. And I couldn't do it because I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor of trauma, of domestic violence. I'm a survivor of surviving. So I only knew that mode of manipulation and lying and trying to BS you all the damn time just to try to get through, because I worried so much about what you thought about me. Through that, I was there for 5 months. I got my son back, and but I had to learn that the reason why I would attack women like that is because I was triggered of how I was mothered. That it was I was always set in my mind like I wasn't going to let nobody disrespect me or hurt me. I was going to get louder, and as a power thrust, I had to gain power over the situation because I felt like you were, I don't know, like I was always in a fight mode, always on the defense. And I remember and when I finally started doing the work on myself, like I've done the steps through AA, NA, and when I was doing them, like, I started learning so much about myself, and I started learning that gift of that power of that self-discovery. There's so much power in self-discovery, so much power in those aha moments, so much power in when I go into it with an open mind and an open heart. I remember I couldn't share when I was in treatment in the beginning because I was so scared that, you're right, I couldn't speak without shaking and crying and armpits sweaty. Like, I couldn't find that 2 seconds of courage just to say, my name's Jasmine, I'm an alcoholic. My name's Jasmine, I'm a member Wilbrighty. My name's Jasmine, I'm an addict. Like, it took me a long time to be able to start sharing until I started learning about myself and working on myself. I had this opportunity. I remember my mom was going to come visit me with my children, and I was just like, something in my stomach just grabbed me, and I reached out to the head counselor, and I was like, if my mom and my kids show up, I'm going to leave with them. Tell them not to come. I don't want to visit. It's too hard, because I was somebody that I'd rather not hear their voice or talk to them on the phone or see them, because it would break me. And I didn't like people to see me broke. I didn't like people. I'd almost just rather avoid it. Anything painful, hurtful, healing, I would rather avoid it. And that counselor told me there's something more. There's something more with your mom. And she shared a story about how the healing she got. Like, you have to speak your truth. You have to speak your truth to know those areas of where you were hurt, those areas of the things that you've done in your life, but not cleaning your side of the street, but speaking your truth, because your voice matters. So I said, okay, I'm going to listen to you guys, right? So I had 2 powerful women that they told me to write a letter to my mom, and they reached out to my mom, and my mom was willing to do that healing work with me. Oh, I remember that day she showed up was probably like just the way my stomach was just knotted up before sharing right now. Those things, right? Those fears, those things of healing. And I got to tell my mom from the very beginning, from when I was molested, the times I felt like she wasn't there for me as a mother. I had all these expectations of what mom listened. I was expecting a like I didn't know I was expecting an opportunity to share where I've never knew about something bad happens to you that the next day we act like nothing ever happened. It wasn't that bad. I learned how to be numb from things, or make it like it's not that bad. That's how I got through all the time. You're going to be okay. My mom listened to me when I shared everything, and she didn't interrupt me. She didn't argue with me. And once in my life with my mom, I felt like my voice was heard. I didn't have to defend myself. All I had to do was sit there and be honest. And what ended up coming from it is when my mom ended up sharing with me is that the things that happened to her as a little girl, she never got healing from. That's why she reacted that way. And I knew all about those triggers, right? Because I was triggered all over the place in Nara, and I had to learn what a trigger was, where your body shuts down. I used to say it was when my demons are awake, because my whole body would get hot. And I would think, if one person touches me, I'm going to start swinging on you. Or I start crying. I didn't want to cry in front of nobody, right? Like telling myself, Jasmine, stop crying. Like I knew all about a trigger. And I didn't know that until I went into Nara. And I was like, what the F is a trigger? Screaming at a counselor. Because my body was, that fight, flight, or freeze. To try to work through those, right? But I got to hear my mom's side, and I remember right after that, I was reading out the Red Road, the Wilbrighty book, and it talked about intergenerational trauma, and like just all these lights started clicking off. Every page I was reading, I was just like, that's what that was. That's when we don't get that healing, we carry it on. And then when we get triggered in those feelings, we can't be there for other people that are hurting or that triggers us. Is because it brings up our own pain and our own undealt with stuff. So I know how important it is when we actually heal, when we face self, when we know that and I realized like how much from that reading the literature, and when I had after that, it gave me a whole new strength. I was able to start sharing in the meetings. I was able to talk about it, tell my story without bawling. I was able to tell my story being honest, except my domestic violence relationship. We still had domestic violence while I was in Nara, but I kept that a secret. They would not do couples therapy because they could see how our relationship was toxic. But I thought we were fooling everybody, right? But I ended up staying in Nara for like 5 months, and I grew a lot. I learned that new language of recovery. I could speak it, but were my actions following it? I don't think so. Because that was part of my I had an area, those secrets of my relationship, my intimate relationship that were still keeping me sick. So I thought I was fooling everybody, not realizing like you don't got to fool nobody, because my truth and my story, that's my truth and my story. If I want to not be like wholeheartedly and heal, I'm keeping myself sick. It's not going to matter to anybody else. That's only matters to me and my walk. And it's going to bleed out. And it did. I graduated after 5 months at Nara, and 2 weeks later, I ended up using, because my ex, he was out and he was already using again. And, one of those, thinking it was going to be a one time or whatever. And I was here back in Idaho, and I used, and he was on a runner, and I knew I had to get away again. And I ended up moving back to Portland. I moved back to Portland. I used for like a week, and I went back to Portland, and I went out with a group of other members to meetings there. And when I went there, I went and claimed my 6 months, because I couldn't let nobody know that I used. I was like that geographic, I couldn't be honest about it. And I went in and claimed my 6 months, and it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good, but it was just showing everybody else, oh, everybody's so proud of me, right? And then within a few weeks later, my ex ended up back in Portland. I ended up using again, and I would lie about it, and I got back into outpatient, then I started working. I stopped outpatient, you know, and then I moved, and then let's see what happened in uh that winter when my ex was back out using. I was trying to stay strong that time, and I tried to set those boundaries and try to be extra tough. But when somebody's in a psychosis, and when they're struggling and they feel like you abandon them and hurt them, you know, like only bad things come in. And I remember I got caught. I was trying to get on the max, and I was back in that fear mode of but I couldn't share with nobody that I was in fear, because I knew that state of mind he was in, but I couldn't share that with no one, because I felt like that's how I protect people, is if I don't let people know what's going on with me when I'm in domestic violence. Because of when I'm in fear, I fear for you too. So I felt better just to try to stay away, thinking that I was just doing everybody else a favor. But he ended up catching up to me, and we got in a bad fight. And I remember I was on my during a period, and we got in a bad fight and ended up having to have sex out there in public in Portland. And I went through that sober. I don't know, when that happened, something, oh, I just felt it brought me back to a very powerless place. I remember he went into his mode of he was gonna be suicidal. He was gonna do this big old thing of it was a full point. That was all, you know. And I told him, let me have half of that. Let me have half of that, right? He's all, really, you ready? You know, like, and I end up using that day. I used that day because I knew all I wanted to do was either be dead, or I wanted to be back home, back in Idaho where my dad and my kids were, because I wanted to feel safe again. Then I was using for about a week, and I was like, I want to move back to Idaho because I don't want nobody to know that I used, because I worked such an awesome program, right? And I was still worried about everybody else, what they thought about me. I moved back to Idaho, and I would move back and I would sober up, and then another bad fight would happen. I would go right back to using, and it started being this cycle for me. But I remember using the first time when I really started giving up again. I ended up using, my nose was broke. I told my dad and my kids that I got into a car accident. My dad came and started having a conversation about domestic violence, and I was like, no, Dad, it was, you know, no, it was a car wreck. No, you know, like, we got in a car wreck and blah 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 blah, like, just lying. And but when he came using heroin, that first time I OD'd, and I ended up snapping to at a hospital. I woke up at that hospital, like, it's weird. Like, I remember going right onto the front of that St. Joe's, and then I was in there, and I remember this lady, she started speaking life into me. She's like, Jasmine, I know you. I played basketball against you, and you're too beautiful to be doing this to yourself. And what do you know, like, she's just like, she was talking about this light around me and all this stuff. And what's crazy is now is like, I don't remember her. And I really feel like God was sending somebody to speak that life back into me. And I remember her standing up to my ex, because he ended up showing up, of course, like hours later or something, when I was waking up, and saying, is it because of him? I could probably lose my job right now, but is it because of him? This is not, you know, like, going, like, speaking all that. And but when I left, because they Narcaned me and everything, I was back in withdrawal mode. And so I got back out of the hospital and I started using again. I was using opiates, I was using heroin, I started using meth, alcohol. I was just right back into full blown. Within 2 months, you know, like, it just got, everything got crazy. It got crazy. And I remember I got left for another woman at this trap house, and I was feeling back to the suicidal, and what do I do? And I felt like if I ran, he was gonna find me. Anywhere I ran, he was gonna find me. I was scared all over again, and then I remember I felt like I couldn't tell nobody, you know, I couldn't reach out. I ended up asking, like, I had a full bottle, I think it was like Fireball, and I was like, what do I do? What do I do? Do I drink this? Do I take his gun? I had all these thoughts of what do I do? How am I going to do this? Like, I felt like I couldn't even walk out of that yard. I was so confined in that fear. Felt like the only way it was like to shoot him or just commit suicide. And I felt like, and then I felt like Creator told me was just to not run. I just hear it distinctly. Don't run. You run into cops, don't run. And we've had to run from cops a lot, you know, and I was told not to run. And that day, we ran into cops. And it was crazy. I remember getting all ready and all this stuff, and it felt like I just had a date with God. I remember I didn't run that day, and I ended up in Assaulton County, and I with 3 felonies. And I remember telling that cop, like, that cop would scream at me, and I remember I would tremble and I would get scared, and he'd be like, shut the fuck up, right? And I remember I was so, and it irks me about policemen because they don't realize when they're messing with somebody that has been through so much trauma, just their power and their like, it just made me hate men. But I remember when I was going into that jail, I was telling myself, this is a blessing in disguise. This is a blessing in disguise. And I went to a little rinky-dink jail in Assaulton County. Like, you walk 6 steps, you're at the end of the thing. And that sucks for someone coming off heroin and opiates. Your legs running, racing, your whole body is just aching. I would have to get in the shower, then get back out, like. And I remember I was just like feeling so weak, and I remember screaming out like, man, I'd rather fucking OD right now instead of going through these withdrawals. I'd rather OD. And I remember this lady in there, and she's all, don't say that, don't, you know. And she's all, and then I was like, I seen her reading a Bible, and I was just like, man, I was like, I can't even find the words right now, like, can you pray with me? And she prayed with me, and then after she prayed with me, I started speaking life into myself. I said, you're a Higheagle, Jasmine. You're stronger than this. You come from, like, a family of prayer. You're an answered prayer. This is an answered prayer. I just started speaking it and speaking it and speaking it. And then after that, I started getting up, working out. Every time my body felt going through those withdrawals, I tried to work out till I got through it. And this jail was like it just felt evil, you know, evil and whatever. And then I reached out to the CPS, to the lead investigator and the director. And I reached out to them and I told them I need help. And you got to be pretty serious if you're going to reach out to a CPS office if you want help. I told them my children are okay. My children are with my dad. They're okay, you know, but I need help. Like, I need help. Can you get me back into NARA? I don't know what my course, and I knew they were trying to release me out of jail too. I remember that first week, but they said if I would testify against my ex, and I told them if I get released today, I probably won't come back alive. And I really did believe that. I knew if I got released, I would be right back on the run with him, and I wouldn't come back alive. And I told him I don't want to be released from jail. Then after that, my attorney was sending me these QBH, all these different suicidal people and all this from what I said. I'm like, no, I'm okay. I'm okay in jail. I'm okay in jail till I know he gets picked up. And I told him I wanted to go back to treatment and this and that, you know, and that's what happened. So like within a month, he ended up getting picked up, and I feel like I could finally breathe again. I wasn't waking up in nightmares no more of things that have happened to me. It was, I don't know, it was like this huge dark cloud lifted off me, and I knew it was time for me. It was time. I ended up getting down to, since I was going to NARA, and they came and advocated for me at court, and I got reduced down to 1 felony, but I was still a felon. And right when I got released, of course, I tried to control it. And go back to, like I was trying to say, can I stay out for a week? And then I go in, right? And then the CPS are like, nope, you wanted our help. your bed dates right now. And I was so grateful for Nara because they had a bed. As soon as she gets released, she has her bed. As soon as she gets released, and that made me feel good. Like, it made me feel loved. Like, I didn't have to wait, right? I had a bed waiting for me. And um so when I went back into I was able to get back into Nara like the next day after I got released. I was out that day. I did nothing to pack. I had nothing. Just I had nothing. And I had to just go. My sister gave me some clothes, and I went as is. When I went back to Nara this time, I had to do a lot of positive affirmations because my self-worth. I had to speak more life. I had to say, I believe in you, I love you, I forgive you, and you are beautiful, and you are worthy. I remember a counselor sharing that with us the first time, and man, that works. Every time I started recognizing that woman in that mirror, I started recognizing her strength and seeing her beauty and that love. And um, but when I went into Nara, I didn't walk in there. I still walked in there a victim. Like, I was straight blaming him for everything. I was like, he made me use, he made me do this, he made me do that. Like, woo wee, I was blaming. And I know that's something that you can't get healing if you're gonna be blaming everybody still. And man, I was a victim walking in there. And um, I remember the second day I was in there, one of the counselors was talking. The way she shared her words and what she said, like it convicted me that I had to take responsibility, that I made that choice to use. I made that choice with my circumstances to not reach out and ask for help. I made that choice to put that needle back in my arm. I made that choice to stay in that relationship. I made that choice, and I told her that. I was like, I know Creator is working through you because you just convicted me. And after that, something else lifted off me. And so I started turning that from being a victim, into that I had to work on myself. And I was in there for 2 weeks, and I still had this overwhelming feeling of wanting to use, like, and opiates and alcohol. And I started being hard on myself. I'm like, if you're in a safe place and everything you went through, but you still want to use, like, I started getting all these self-defeating thoughts. Like, am I wasting my time here again? Like, am I just being away from my children this much longer, and I'm not even going to get well? Like, this is just leave now. Like, I had all these thoughts. Just, oh, I was being attacked. I reached out to one of the admin staff, Leela, there, and I told her that all those thoughts I was feeling. I was like, I'm craving heroin, I'm craving opiates, I'm craving alcohol. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I'm here and I'm in a safe place and it's not around me. And she told me about that naltrexone. She's like, I'll go to the doctor and tell them, and this is gonna help, this will help, whatever. And of course I had to wait for like a week or two. You have to get your liver and everything checked. And I'd get triggered from that too when they try to put a needle in my arm. Like, I would get that angry feeling because after they would do my blood, I would wait for the high to hit me, and it wouldn't hit me. Then I was all pissed off about that. Like, I was just a mess. But when I got that naltrexone, it took away all my cravings, and I was finally again to start working on myself. What worked different? So I had my counselor. I had a new counselor in there, and she had me do codependency steps, and I was like, what? And when I did them, man, I had so many aha moments with codependency. Like, jeez, especially like wanting everybody to see that light, the light that I see. Like, I would never allow people to have their own aha moments or their own self-discovery or nothing. I wanted them to see the light the way I seen the light. I wanted them to get a taste of life the way I got a taste of life, not honoring nobody else's path, right? I was so wanting everybody to get, or I would dim down my light because I didn't want people to think I was my ego or whatever it was. I could never be really proud of myself. If somebody was down, I had to be down with them. So those codependency steps, like, man, those Those helped me a lot. What I did different this time at NARA is I really faced myself. I spoke about everything that I actually been through, especially like my domestic violence and my sexual violence. I spoke on all that. I would challenge myself and I would share in group settings to get the healing that I knew I needed. It wasn't about what nobody else. It was about my healing. I had to get well. I had to face those times where I felt that nudge of I needed to speak or needed to share, and I had to get it off. There'd be times I'd be shaking, sweating, and but after something else would lift off me. I remember the first time singing, we're in a talking circle and it was all women. And they're like, Jasmine, you know that song, can you get it started for us? And and I was just like, what? Like what? Like, then finally I'm like, okay. And I remember the first time I sang and I was just shaking. Man, I was just shaking. But it released something and it broke through something. And I know through my story and everything that I've been through, I know how much power there is in our songs. I know how much power there is in that prayer. I know how much power there is when we just be honest and we just be transparent. I know how much power there is, like, in our story to walk, and there's just the reassurance and the times when we get opportunities, like, to share our experience, strength, and hope, right? So I graduated NARA after 57 days, and I had to come back I was on of course, a travel permit and all that, but since I graduated NARA, like, I've kept my October 2018. Since October 18th was the very first Wellbriety meeting that I started with a group of other people, right? Because Wellbriety, you're not any meeting, whatever. It's not you by yourself. Like I am nobody without the other members, right? The other group, like that's what that numbers. It just makes it. That's what it is, and but that first meeting, I remember when I was so set on this. I had this box of stuff to start a meeting that I've been holding on for like over a year or two, because I was so set. I remember all the Portland Wellbriety members, when they'd bring those meetings in to NARA, I remember I used to sit back like, that's what I want to do one day, right? That's what I want to do one day. And because I would see their strength. And I'm like, how are they up there sharing their story? How are they up there talking about that stuff? Like, wow. And how are they talking about me right now, right? Like, I used to be in awe and just that presence and that strength and those songs and the unity. And then everybody in that circle, because when we're all in a circle, we're all connected. Nobody's above, nobody's below. Like, we're all connected. And I could feel that strength and that power. And so I knew that's something that was part of my vision, right? So I got the Wellbriety, the fire starter kit, and I was holding on to it for